Good evening, Vice Mayor, Council members. As was noted, my name is Casey Elliott. I'm Vice President at Townsend Public Affairs and work with the city on your legislative agenda. Just want to share a quick PowerPoint to provide information on how members of the public can participate in the legislative process. Just as a real brief primer, before one can really engage in the legislative process, it's important to understand kind of the basics about the process. Within your agenda packet, there's a flow chart that tries to lay forth the legislative process for people to understand. But essentially, while we feel often in Sacramento that it's an insular process and can be very confusing, that there is an ample opportunity for public engagement. When at the beginning of a legislative session, bills are introduced by legislators. These bill ideas can come from anywhere. Can come from a legislator, a member of the public, professional advocates, responses to items within the community or seen on news. Once legislation is introduced, it has to go through a number of steps, including in the House of Origin. So this would be assembly bills that are introduced in the Assembly, Senate bills that are introduced in the Senate. Bills usually have to go through a policy committee or two, depending upon the topic of the bill. A fiscal committee, depending upon whether or not there's a monetary impact from the legislation to the state. And then as well as a full vote of the floor in that house. Each of those opportunities, each of those steps along the way, there's opportunity for public engagement, whether that's making a position known, testifying at committee hearings, reaching out to legislators. And then as a bill progresses, it moves from the first house to what we refer to as the second house. So this would be assembly bills going into the Senate, Senate bills coming over to the Assembly. And a similar process gets played out again with policy committees, fiscal committees, and floor votes. Slight bit of difference on the second house. If a bill is amended in the second house, it would need to go back to its house of origin for what we call a concurrence vote. So the legislation would be passed by the same houses in the same format. Again, all of those steps along the way allow for public participation and input. Once a bill is signed by the legislature, it would go to the governor for their consideration. The legislative process follows a pretty standardized calendar. It fluctuates a little bit weeks, from even years to odd years because it is a 2-year legislative cycle. But the nice thing is the legislative calendar is put out about a year, usually at the beginning of Q4 for the following year. So you have about a year heads up as to most of the major deadlines as to where to engage. The House of Origin process that I described takes over about 6 months, usually from January to June approximately. And then the second house process gets sped up much quicker. That's where we are currently. And that process usually takes about 3 months from June to August. And then the governor, when a bill reaches him, he'll have 12 to 30 days, depending upon when the legislation arrives at his desk. So more specific, how can we engage? There's a number of resources available online to help members engage not only with legislators in Sacramento and DC, but also with the city. The city's Legislative Review Committee webpage, the LRC webpage, has information put forth by the city on the meetings of the committee. So the agendas, the minutes, so people can engage at a local level to help have input on the city's positions on some of these measures. It will also contain the city's legislative agenda, which is the full list of priorities and position statements adopted by a city council at the beginning of the year, typically. The LRC's webpage also has a running list of the legislation considered by the committee, the position adopted by the committee, as well as the current status of that measure. So if people want to kind of monitor and follow what has been going on, there's an availability to do that. And then there's also information on how to contact legislators. Additionally, on the LRC website is a significant level of information, not just related to the city, but related to what's going on in Sacramento and DC. There's the flow chart that's in your packet is linked through on the LRC webpage. So there's information on the process. As well as links to directly search legislation, where you can find more information, bill analyses, hearing dates, those things. contact information for federal, state, and local officials, links to various associations that the city belongs to or has an interest in, as well as information on how to submit a letter. A member of the public can submit a letter. I should note that is the same as the information that's within the council packet tonight as well. Outside of the LRC webpage, there is a substantial amount of information available to the public through the state's websites. The Assembly and Senate each have their own websites with information and web pages for individual legislators, committees, schedules, kind of all of the background. There's archive links for the video recordings of committees, the audio recordings of the committees. There's also the legislative information website, which is the main website to get bill information, has bill analyses, text for individual bills dating back to 1999. That's also where, if you wanted to look up state codes and things, you could find information there. And then also the governor's website has significant level of information put out by his office, including press releases, appointment information, contact information for public comment. All of those websites have links on the LRC webpage. So if you don't have time to jot down all these web addresses, they can be found on the LRC webpage as well. One of the newer ways that members of the public have to interact with the state legislature is the letter portal. This was established by the legislature 2 years ago. It's a way that members of the public can submit physical copies of letters. Those letters, and should note, any member of the public can submit a letter through the letter portal. So whether it's me as a registered advocate, members of the council, individual members of the public, associations, everyone can submit through the letter portal. The information within the portal, once it is submitted, stays within the portal. So it's accessible by legislators, their staff, committee staff, and that information stays within the portal so they can see those things as they as they move over time. This is important because while there still is the ability to send in letters or make positions known through email, faxes, snail mail, those elements, once that piece of paper is physically, removed from someone, it's very difficult to kind of trace back what has happened. So the letter portal allows for that capturing over time. To participate in the letter portal, it does require a one-time registration. And then after that, you can just sign into an account and post. In order to register, it's relatively easy. You just put in information. It sends you a link, you verify your email address and your password, and then you're good to go. Once you're registered and you sign back into the portal, there's an option to submit a letter. And then from there, an individual would just search for the specific bill that they are looking for. And then once they've gotten to that bill, there will be a page that will prompt you to indicate the position that you have on a bill. So support, opposition, support if amended, opposed unless amended, or some other version of a position. Allows you to adapt a subject. So typically that's you would note what bill you're talking about in your position. The opportunity to upload a file. This would generally be the letter, review it, and submit it, and then it's captured within the portal. I should note that the one thing regarding the legislative portal is once a bill moves from the legislature to the governor's office does not have access to the legislative portal. So if individuals do submit letters through the legislative portal, it would be best if once that bill moves to the governor's office to draft a hard copy letter and send that. There is also an email address for the governor's office that if anyone's interested in, I'm happy to provide that later. And with that, I'd be happy to answer any questions on any of these items.